I do need to start this discussion by acknowledging the fact that the taxpayers of Walpole are crying out for tax relief. And I know this to be true. I think many people sitting here would agree, because during the last several months before the election, I went out and talked to many people. And in fact, my platform was about reducing taxes for the residents of this town, because I and many others feel that we are getting crushed with the increased rate of taxes. Some said it more strongly than others, but the theme was the same. And I think it's important that we, as the Board of Selectmen, recognize this need and do everything we can to responsibly and prudently reduce real estate taxes in the town of Walpole. There's many different ways to approach it. Obviously, the biggest way and the most effective way to approach it is to reduce spending. But that's sort of a multi-step process and part of the budgeting process, and that's outside of the scope of what we're discussing tonight. But I just want to sort of set the table that what I'm proposing to do, and hopefully the board will vote on it tonight, is the first step in what will be probably many steps in lowering the tax bill for the residents of Walpole. And the mechanism by which to do that, at least to take this first step, is to put an article on the fall town warrant which asks at town meeting to vote to transfer from available funds, one of the funds being free cash. And the town does have other funds with unrestricted funds in there, and determine an amount of money that can be removed from free cash and use it to apply to next year's tax levy and reduce the tax levy that will be requested from the taxpayer. And that circles back around to setting the tax rate. So I have drafted an article, and I'll read it for what it's worth, although according to Jim, and I think everyone will agree, town council will have to review the language to make sure that it's legal and appropriate. And I will honestly admit that I looked at other town warrants for the language, because other towns do this on a regular basis. They understand that actually, let me just back up a little bit, because maybe the public doesn't know, and I certainly didn't know until I did research. What is free cash? And free cash is the remaining unrestricted funds from operations from previous years. It's unexpended monies from the previous year plus actual receipts in excess of revenue estimates, an unspent amount in budget line items. So I guess an analogy, although it may not be perfect, would be change back from your shopping trip if you're buying a product. So I did go to other towns and did some research to see what they have done to attempt to reduce their tax rates, and one of the things that they've done is put this on their town warrant. Now, we don't know how much, I don't know personally at this point how much would be available from the funds, of the different funds that we have, but once we get this approved and get it on the warrant, then we can work with FinCom and Jim to see what we could use, how we could actually compute that amount. So the language that I've crafted, and I guess I could say stole from other town warrants, is to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum, to meet the appropriations for the ensuing fiscal year, and authorize the assessor to use said sum in fixing the tax rate or take any other action relative thereto. And what that essentially does is take money from, I'm just using for simplistic purposes, free cash, and apply it to the tax levy, and that would reduce our tax levy by that amount of money. So I'd like to have some discussion about it with the board, and I think it's a good first step, and because we're not determining an amount now, I think it's something that should be done. And I think it will show that we recognize that we, as part of the budget process, this would be one step in alleviating that. And I don't see any downside to putting it on the warrant as long as the language is appropriate.
Go.
I do. You know, what, for those of you who don't know, I've been a selectman for 6 years. I was on finance committee for 6 years. My background is in accounting and accounting systems. So, you know, it's really popular to tell people you're gonna cut their taxes, not raise their taxes, all those kind of things. And I know Ann ran on that platform, but I've also talked to hundreds and hundreds of people every year. And one of the things that I hear from people is they want to maintain services. Many of them want to add services in whatever area they're most interested in. So I think one of the things we have to do is find that happy balance. And I think that one of the other problems that towns do to get themselves in trouble, and Walpole got themselves in trouble, 18, 20 years ago, is confusing one-time money with reoccurring money. And an example is, if you're gonna buy a fire truck, that's not a reoccurring thing. You don't buy a fire truck every year. So you can take monies that may not be reoccurring, for example, free cash. You have money left over in your accounts, it drops down to free cash. You may have town meeting make a decision to take that money and put it away in a reserve account for a fire truck. And at some point in the future, you make a decision to go buy that fire truck and you pay for it. So those things are one-time money. Fire trucks, buildings, the whole capital budget is an example. Computers for the schools, furniture, all those kind of things. Those are capital budget items. And that should be one-time money. We don't want to be paying firefighters, policemen, DPW workers, teachers with one-time money. Towns do that, they get themselves in trouble. So we want to make sure that we're using reoccurring revenues to pay for things that reoccur. And I think that to talk about using one-time money rather than reoccurring revenue is not a good idea. Because what you're going to do is, at some point, you will run out of one-time money pretty quickly. And then the question becomes, who are you going to lay off? So let's say we did this for a year, you gathered up all of the available money, you shorted out the ambulance fund, you shorted out all your reserve accounts. We've put a couple $1 million in OPEB to meet our liabilities for other post-employee benefits. We could pull the money out of that account. All of a sudden, we've created a lot of problems for ourselves. Our bond rating would drop. The accounting firm that audits us would be in a tizzy because our reserves are dropping. And a town has reserves just like people have reserves. You keep money in a savings account, or maybe it's an investment account, but when the roof needs to be replaced, you want to use that money. So it's very important that we keep those two things apart. I think the biggest problem I see with Ann's proposal is it's going to try to use one-time money for a reoccurring cost. And it makes me want to ask, when the one-time money runs out, who are you going to lay off? Because I think it's important to address that. I think the bond rating is very important. We have a good bond rating. I know the state of Massachusetts just dropped their bond rating. The bond rating agencies dropped Massachusetts' rating because they're rating what they call the rainy day account too much to balance the budget. And they're right in that budget process right now at the state level. We also know that the federal government may be giving us less help to the state, especially for healthcare, which is our number one driver of budget increases. So I think it's just important to really give this some thought. I'm against it from everything I've heard so far. I would say that in general, we need to really think about it. And I'm not in favor of doing things that will cause us to have to lay off employees either this year, next year, or down the road, so. What it's worth.
Layoff, what's laying off employees?
Well, if you use one-time money, we have the ability to raise the tax limit 2.5% every year. And we do that, and that's what pays for raises for employees. It's what pays to keep the streetlights on, to pay for the electricity as it goes up. And Ann's idea basically is to say we're not going to increase our taxes next year. So how are we going to pay our people? How are we going to keep them employed? I think it's important that if your goal is to get rid of employees, to reduce police and fire, to reduce maybe trash service, to reduce snow plowing, streetlights, whatever, schools, whatever it is you want to decrease spending on, I think it's important for you to say that up front. I mean, because that's the ripple effect that comes into play, and it comes into play very quickly.
I'd like to rebut. First of all, I think the applying free cash to reduce the subsequent year's tax levy is not only an entirely I think it's the opposite of using free cash for operations, because that's what we've been doing, if I'm not mistaken. We've been taking, well, and I see people shaking their heads. We had $7 million in free cash last year. If we budgeted appropriately, and at town meeting appropriate the money, and that's what we base our tax levy on, there'd be, the only reason we would need to use our free cash would be for those one-time extraordinary purposes. But it is entirely appropriate to use free cash to reduce the subsequent year's tax levy. So I guess my view of it, it's the opposite of using it for operations.
I
I think
have
there's
a
an
question
implication there
that
that
might
I'm looking to reduce, lay off people.
I
and
don't know
that's
where that
not
came
even-
from,
But
but
that's not part of this discussion.
I do have a
Well, it
question.
is part of the
What-
discussion.
No, I want,
Okay,
I
but
want,
wait a
I want to
second,
just
wait a
ask,
second,
you
please.
said one-time money over and over again. What is the one-time money that you're talking about? Is free cash considered, you consider that one-time money?
You have to sort of think about what happens. Free cash isn't really free, and it's not really cash. What unspent monies that drop down into free cash is, for example, is how we fund capital budget items. So if we use up all of our free cash, then we have no money available for capital budget items. So, this is.
But
this is
how
really
is it defined, what do you define as one-time money? What is,
money that's not reoccurring.
so where did the money come from that is in free cash?
It's generally money that was left over from something else, or monies that we hold in reserve.
So
This
it's
is
money
really-
that the taxpayers paid that every year, and then it's now available this year?
Well, but free cash also goes up and down. Like, we've
Now, do you
used free
consider-
cash, wait, hold on. We've used free cash on some of our building projects as an example.
Sure, but it's
You know,
not,
This,
that doesn't make it one-time money. It's money that was tax money.
it's really a discussion. This is a huge discussion if we really want to dig into how taxpayer revenue flows through a town and where it goes. And I feel a little bit that maybe you weren't as transparent with us. I feel a little bit out of sorts because you're trying to push something through without having talked to me about what your goal is. You didn't give us any material. So, I'm just trying to respond to what I heard you say, and I think it's a really bad idea.
Do you consider the
Wait a
ambulance?
second.
I'm
Can we do
continuing
this?
on the.
Can I give a point of order?
No,
For
I'm asking about
one-time monies?
one-time money. Do you consider the ambulance fund money one-time money?
So prison mitigation money goes
That's-
into free cash, and that is one-time money.
Okay, that's
Because we
fine.
have not always gotten it, just to
So-
throw it out there.
What about the ambulance fund? Do you consider that one-time money?
Well, I think of ambulance money as this way. We bill for ambulance services. It's the only service that's provided to residents of the town that we can actually bill for. So when somebody needs an ambulance, we bill their insurance company, whatever, however that works. That money is used to put in reserve for ambulances. I also think of it as that's the money that pays for many of the EMTs and paramedics, not all of them. Certainly, it doesn't cover the ambulance service, but I think of that as a process of the money comes in, it gets certified as free cash, we take that money and we roll it right back into the ambulance service, as an example. So you could say that it's one-time money, but we're using it as such that ambulance money comes in, it has to drop to free cash because it's not a revolving account. So it has to get certified as free cash, and then we reuse that money in the following year to pay for the next year's ambulance service. So it's a hybrid.
So how did it accumulate that, there was over
Could I just
1.3
clarify
million.
that?
please.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to.
No, that's okay.
Ambulance fund stays in the ambulance fund. The ambulance monies do not drop to free cash. Ambulance funds this year, I think we closed out at about 1.4 million. We appropriated 665 out of the operating budget. Last year, I believe we appropriated just around $1 million out of that budget because we needed to replace the ambulance. And we also, which was about 335, and we also needed to, we used 100,000 to offset the cost of the fire station. So historically on the ambulance funds, it's like, seems to be almost every other year. We take 665 from the budget, and we wait a year and take 300 or so for an ambulance, maybe up to 400 for some other capital equipments. Like this year, we're going to use the stretcher, which your board considered back in June. So we use that fund on ambulance-related capital purchases and to assist with the balancing of the budget process.
Okay, and that 660,000 that you used out of the budget from this year was to balance the budget, you said, but that was, how does that relate to the cost of providing ambulance service?
The cost of approximately the fire department budget is about $2 million. Does that sound about right? 2 million or so-ish. So the way you could look at it is 665,000 offset that 2 or 2.2 million.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. What did you just say?
The fire budget was about 2 or 2.2 million.
But how about specifically as to providing ambulance services? How does that 660,000?
That's a portion. We don't appropriate the whole amount because we deplete it down to zero.
But what is the cost of providing ambulance services?
The chief would be a better person to answer that. I don't know if you could, we'd ask him.
And
for a
are
number.
you, it's now, there's 784,000 that's accumulated there that have you, are you gonna just buy ambulances with
No,
those?
that number will grow. It'll probably be, last year closed out at 1.4. Your board voted in May to increase the ambulance fees, maybe as high as 1.5 or so next year. We'll again take the 665, take that down. We'll likely have an ambulance that will come up, so that'll deplete it down to, I'm guessing next year it'll start around 800,000 or 900,000. So each
Yeah.
year, a
Right,
portion
so it
rolls
keeps
forward.
going up, taxpayers keep paying more, this ambulance fund keeps going up, where is that
There's a
800,000?
big but. But the state is in the process of taking necessary steps to regulate the fees that ambulance services can collect. That is pending in litigation. So your action that your board took in May, the state may make that null and reduce those fees altogether. We don't know where we.
But why are we saving the $784,000? Is there a plan for that money?
To allow it to continue to roll over each year. And if your board directs me to use more of those funds to balance, actually, this past year, it used to be $650. We increased it by $15,000 to bridge that small gap. If your board would like, and finance committee would like to see me use more of that, we could do that.
But this isn't, this isn't one-time money, this is money that comes in every year, is that correct?
This is reoccurring. Just the ambulance fund, yes.
The ambulance.
Right, so we're, you've been paying into, 660,000 operating money this year, and you still have it $784,000 there. Where's that money going to be used? Should it be given back to the taxpayers?
It's going to sit in that account until town meeting reappropriates the funds.
So next year, it's going to go up by another 1.2, 1.4, is that what you said?
I think, my guess would be the balance to close out the year would be about 1.5, then we take out 665, then we take out probably another 300,000 or 400,000. So whatever that is off.
But it's continuing to grow. What's the long-term plan for the money?
We have used it in the past. I mean, I think I've provided you and everyone on the board with the spreadsheet that goes back 11 years or so, and we consistently have a balance in that budget. Our auditors.
That seems a little high, though, 784,000.
Yeah. I don't have the rest, the historic.
But how many ambulances can you buy with 784,000?
2.
And but we're getting more next year.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we constantly rotate them
Every
through.
3 years.
Yeah, Every 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
We-
All right,
we have
so-
3 now.
So the only money that the plan is to use this money, 600,000. Next year, will you take some for the budget?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. And then you're buying another ambulance next year, probably?
I don't have the capital plan in front of me, but I know we didn't buy one this year, so I would assume it
All
might be
right,
on.
but it's still gonna leave some money left over, is that right? How much?
Again, I don't have it.
About 800?
My
You know,
guess is
I'm gonna
seven.
interrupt, no, I'm gonna interrupt right now, David, because.
The point is,
No,
it's
the
not a-
point is, when we're talking about budgets, and you want specificity, and we don't have the numbers now, it isn't going smoothly, and we can go back and forth and try to
The
do
point
this.
is, for some reason, you're holding $784,000 in this account, and I wonder why.
The town is holding it until it's appropriated.
Right. All right, so let's appropriate it to the taxpayers, in Ms. Ragosta's motion.
Great. And when we get more thorough information on this.
Unless you have some other plan for it.
No, this is the first time I've ever even thought about it.
I mean, I don't know when anyone ever says that the best way to run your household is living paycheck to paycheck, that I don't think it makes sense for the town either.
I'd like to weigh in again. No one is, I think we're jumping ahead. No one's suggesting that we reduce free cash to zero. And I'm looking at our free cash, certified free cash amount as of July 2016, which was $7.5 million. That means that over the course of a couple of years, I would imagine, we took in more money based on our long-standing policy of taxing to the max of 2.5% to the legal limit, plus new growth, plus our debt exclusion override, which is a separate issue. And we proceeded to spend $4 million of the $7.5 million in fall 2016 town meeting. And I don't disagree with you. There are absolutely one-time purposes, capital items, where it is appropriate to use free cash. But capital items should also be budgeted as part of our tax levy, as our ongoing revenue, and put into the budget initially, as opposed to, oh, we have this extra money, let's find a way to spend it. And then I have this paper, which obviously no one else here has, although the other board members might. Jim has it. So there was, after fall town meeting of 2016, there was $3.4 million in the certified free cash. $840,000 of it went to the vehicle maintenance garage, again, a capital item. In our spring town meeting, we spent another $900,000 on other capital projects. So now we have some in reserve. I think the question that my article on the warrant is really going just to force us to do is look at how much is enough in free cash, look at how much is enough in the ambulance fund, because my understanding of the ambulance fund is those funds can be used, and I think appropriately should be used, to offset the cost of operating our emergency medical services. And again, it can be done by reducing the tax levy. And I would say, can I ask you, what is the stabilization fund? Isn't that what our backup, what is a stabilization? I'm not asking for the balance, I'm just asking what it
Current
is.
balance is $2.2 million. That money is set aside by town meeting each year. Historically, since I've been the TA, we've put at least $100,000. This is the most the town has ever had in that stabilization fund at this time.
And what's the purpose of it?
It's our rainy day fund.
Exactly.
We have to get money out of there or put it in, we have to have a 2/3 vote.
Totally agreed. And that's, our stabilization fund, I think, is in support of our bank account that Nancy was referring to. So I think, again, it goes to the question of how many funds do we need, and I think we need to take a long, hard look at it. And again, I don't want to go outside of the scope of this discussion, but the genesis of spending free cash or even accumulating free cash goes to our budgeting process. And I think we need to look long and hard, because you generate free cash by taking in many more receipts than you spend, or that has been appropriated in the budget. I disagree, and I think Mark and I will just disagree on this philosophically. I don't believe free cash is a one-time deal. It's money that keeps coming in every year based on tax revenue. In some years, we may not have accumulated much free cash because we might have spent up to what we took in for tax receipts. So I don't view it as I don't think it, and we can look at the definition to see if it is, but I don't think it is. I think it's important to have this article on the warrant because it doesn't, and that's why I intentionally did not name a number. Because that is what we can work towards as it gets closer to town meeting. But I think the number might end up being $50,000. It may be a de minimis amount, and that's what we might all come to. But I think it needs to be on the warrant. And I don't see any downside to putting it on the warrant.
And I'm speaking for 20% of the board when I say this. This is an absolutely huge issue. I have absolutely no problem looking long and hard at the budget. It is an issue, though, that I would personally feel more comfortable with if we sat with the FinCom and the school committee and other boards and actually took a deep dive on any of these, whether it was one-time accounts or one-time monies or reoccurring monies, and take a good hard look at how they all work with a complete understanding. What I don't have is a complete understanding tonight. Even the language of your article is something that I haven't seen, I just heard, and unlike town meeting where substitute motions are made on the floor, you know, we try to pride ourselves in doing our homework, studying it, and then reacting to it, and that's just the way I'm wired, and I'm not saying anybody else is wired a different way. I'm all open to taking a long, hard look at the budget and returning money if it's appropriate to do so without weakening our public safety in the services that we provide. That said, I would feel much more comfortable if we could next week get together with at least the FinCom and have a lively discussion on this, but that's just my perspective.
And I'd like to just correct for the record, I did send an email to Jim with the exact language to be put on the article and I actually requested that this item be put on the agenda for a discussion and a vote. And I'm just saying, so for anyone who is not aware of the language, I put forth the language and requested that it be put on the agenda. And I specifically put the language on there. I assumed that it would be put in the packet. I don't know. And when it wasn't, I didn't see any problem with it because I just assumed that. And I'm not casting any blame on anybody.
No,
I'm
no,
just saying,
but my
but to
point
correct the
is-
record
right.
from
No,
me,
I'm not,
to
yeah.
say that I am presenting something with no notice, I think is not correct at this point. Does that
Well,
make sense?
I mean, did you see the language?
No.
No, but also there's just a vetting process of it. Whether I had the language on last Thursday or I'm hearing it tonight, the theory of it, there's other boards and other budgets that I feel that this impacts, that there needs to be more of a vetting process to figure out if it is something that should be done. I just,
I don't see it as all that confusing or all that needing of understanding. It basically is saying that when you overcharge the citizens this year.
No,
you should give
David,
them-
come on.
You should
Come
give them
on.
some of the
Be
money.
honest,
It should at
David.
least be.
I feel like this was kind of an ambush, that you brought a bunch of people here tonight
No,
to
let
talk
me
about a
finish.
topic
Let
that
me
we
fin-
weren't,
when you
we didn't
end
know
up-
what it was gonna be,
when-
and here you go spouting off again.
When there's
So come
more
back to
money,
the fact
when
level,
there's more
David.
money this year than you need.
back to the fact
Give
level,
it back
David.
to the taxpayers the next year, or at least look at it as money that you can use to lower the tax rate
Thank
for
you for
next
the
year.
ambush, David. Thank you,
I don't
Ann,
think-
for the ambush.
Again-
I'm all in favor of having a budget workshop. Let's pick a
As
date.
am I.
Let's get FinCom, capital budget, school committee, all the appropriate boards and
Why is it an
committees.
ambush? I mean, we're having a discussion, I don't know.
Yeah, but Ann had lots of material she was flipping through that she didn't share with us.
Listen, when we
so-
discuss the budget, okay, we get a binder about the size of this desk with every number in it, with plenty of time to review it. And quite frankly, We don't have that now, so I don't feel comfortable going forward with anything. That said, there is merit to what you are saying, and I would love to sit down and talk with the FinCom and the other people when we make a decision like this that are gonna be impacted, and do it in a strategic way instead of shooting from the hip. And I don't think that's asking too much.
And if it's the right decision to make, it will still be the right decision to make.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you. I guess my concern is the timing of it. Will we be able to accomplish that in time? Because if we don't, then it's an irrelevant point.
Right, it's a moot point. I got it.
And I think it's an opportunity lost.
As do I. However, Jim or Cindy, can we figure out how quickly we can at least get the FinCom? And if I'm on the FinCom, I would be like, why aren't we involved in the process?
Well, you will be
Right, and I
at the
think
point
that's right. I
after
think
it's
we
on
would
the
sponsor
warrant.
the article and get them involved.
When we went before the FinCom as a group, I believe if we check those minutes, we said we would work collaboratively instead of two boards that never talk. And you know what? I am all in favor of sitting down and hearing what they have to say on this. This is a huge, game-changing idea for our town. And there may be some significant merit to it, but I can't tell you what that is right now.
And for me, our free cash has not been up here. We have been trying to save and listen to taxpayers and get projects done when a building hadn't been built in this town for 60 years. And they're seriously crumbling. They were falling down. Our seniors are in a cafeteria. And we have listened and been making sure that we could do this for the town. And we had years of not getting prison mitigation money. And then when we get it, it certifies we get 2 years in a row at the same time. So that falsely bumps up our free cash to make it look like it's bigger than normal. I mean, it's just, all of a sudden, in 1 month, you want to change this, that unfortunately, I don't think it's good for the town. I mean, there's other things that if, at the end of our projects, there are liabilities that this town also still needs to be responsible for. And, you know, as Eric said, when we go through the budget, we sit and go through all the line items. Right now, our free cash, it looks like it's going to be that, but it's not at the end of the day. And, I mean, would I absolutely love to have a tax break myself? Yes, I would absolutely love to. I mean, I am a shift worker as a nurse. I have 3 children in the public school system that I pay fees for, I pay sports fees for, just like everybody else. And I would love to get money back. So if I was sitting here and thinking about just me, that would be great, but I'm not. My responsibility here is to everybody in this town, and everybody's parent in this town, and everybody's kids in this town, and everybody who needs services. People who need the fire department and the ambulances to come and save their loved ones. Someone who has had a heart attack running down the street to be able to have their response time. Someone who's unfortunately overdosed and need Narcan that we need to pay for because it's not going to be free. There are so many fees, and we have 20 square miles in this town. We have a lot of roads. In general, I think our roads are in really good condition compared to other towns. We put a lot of money into that. We have, there's water pipes that go, that, there's water and sewer funding, but then even with that, we still have to repave roads. There's a lot of things going on. We're also talking about what's going on with Craft and with the train. Are we going to have to put more money into fighting that? When and if this starts to happen in the mitigation process? And where do you find that extra money if we do need that? There's a lot of things. It's not as simple as saying, I want to look really good right now and I want to give some money back and make a public stance.
So I think how I would respond to that is, I think it's a big stretch to go from reducing the tax levy by a sum of money to discontinuing all these services, for which we are taxed the maximum of 2.5% increase every year. I'd also like to say that, and I'd just like to go back to the ambush comment, which again, the characterization of that, I think is inappropriate. And if we would like to, I would be happy to get the email that I sent to the town administrator with the language in the article and what I wanted to discuss. I had another point to make. And I would also say that this is not about making a splash. It's not about making myself look good. This is not about Ann Ragosta. And I appreciate what you say when you said it's not about you, and it's about everyone in town. And I, too, am thinking about everyone in town. I'm thinking about every elderly person in town who is, when I say people are crying for tax relief, those are not empty words. Those are people that, there's not going to be a dog and pony show about lining people up and coming up to the podium and saying, I can't pay my taxes. But it is a real cry, and I think that people, even if you look at people who moved here 10 years ago, when their taxes were at the tax rate of $10.33 or 50 cents, and their taxes have increased by, and I know you've heard this song and dance before, because I have the numbers from DOR, their taxes have gone up in 10 years over 42%. And again, that's not smoke and mirrors. Those are real tax dollars, those are real dollars, those are real figures. We can all look at our taxes. Setting aside even the people that have lived here their whole lives that have seen their taxes escalate, the people that have moved here 10 years ago, do you think that they're sitting here, I have talked to some of them, that they didn't sign up for these big tax increases? And I ask again, what good are the services in town? And I hope that we go back to when I started this conversation, that to reduce the tax levy in a prudent and responsible manner. And I specifically said that for a reason. But when you go back to all the services in all the good schools are meaningless for people who cannot afford to live in the town. And I don't usually take offense at many things, but I do have to say I take offense that you are calling this a ploy for the public, because it is not. I've sat on the finance committee. I'm not going to go into my background. That's,
Sure.
but I've sat on the finance committee through a budget cycle. I know exactly how the budget works, although I may not know the minutia. I've sat on the personnel board. I've been an RTM. I am perfectly cognizant of the basics of taxation and spending. So with that being said, if we are going to go forward with this or something to get it considered for the town warrant for the fall, I'm willing to listen.
Right. Well, to that point, I am fully supportive of going at this in a prudent manner. And for me, that means further discussion and information. And that's just my perspective on it. No one else is here. And I don't think it's as simple as returning monies and all of that. I think it warrants a pretty significant discussion with other people and other committees in this town. And that's just the way I feel about it. Mark, I don't know.
I think that, the logical next step, and we've talked about it over the last couple of months, is to, identify a date and have a workshop on, the whole budget. I mean, this is something that FinCom and Capital Budget, School Committee, all the other appropriate boards and committees will want to be a part of. This is the whole budgeting process is a significant process.
Right.
And I don't like the idea of changing it quickly without a lot of transparency. And I know you didn't like that I used the word ambush, but when I look in the audience, it's clear that you've had time to ask people to come to the meeting, but it's clear that you didn't share with us what we were going to talk about, so that it could be a fair and balanced kind of thing. So
These are not people. These are taxpayers in the town who are
I understand.
concerned about where their taxes are being spent and how much they're
I
being taxed.
understand, but there are specific people that you picked out
They are specific people.
versus knowing that an item's on the agenda that gives everyone a chance to come in and talk about it. And, usually if you're gonna come in and talk about a certain piece of information, that information is available in the packet on Thursday, the week before the meeting. And then we all would have had a chance to read up on it. And if it was important to have a lot of people in the room, we all could have done that. So, I'm just saying, I think, I know you talk about transparency, but you didn't use a lot in this particular case.
I don't see this as being a controversial issue. I understand that but I don't think it's having people in the audience that are interested in this particular topic listening to our public forum. There's no debate.
Find that
whether people-
intimidating somehow?
No, not at all, David.
Okay.
And,
Then
I
it
think
shouldn't,
that-
it shouldn't even be, it shouldn't bother you then.
Well, you're the one who brought it
Wait a
up,
second,
David,
guys.
so-
I mean, we're all talking about what was said, what wasn't said. Let me set the record straight. So there is some bad blood here. In hindsight, should Jack Fisher be here? Should Dennis be here? Yeah, probably, because those are that's the group that actually sets the tax rate, number one. Number two, this is a huge issue. So, I know we're up against a deadline, so I would ask Jim, you and Cindy to look to see if we can get a budgeting workshop as early as later this week or next week to do it before our next meeting. And hopefully it can get done. I mean,
I would also like the auditors, the
Well,
company.
yeah.
You know what I mean? They need to be involved. They come in and review our books. I mean, I
It's fine.
think that's important to hear from them.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion on this issue? Okay, with that, we'll go to the town administrator's report. Yes, Phil?
We were told earlier that we couldn't talk about the issue at open forum, but